welcome back to my channel. Today I'm doing my control dream team and how their skills work together. They work a little differently than a resilience team in how many rounds they're actually active. So with Donald, his first skill is only active every 4 turns, the second is every 2, and the last one is every 1, but it's a passive skill to increase the damage taken by all enemies, and it can stack up to 4 times for 4 turns. Then we have Yamira. Her first skill is every 8 turns for damage, and then her second is passive in that it reduces damage dealt by 15.2% for bleeding enemies and 6% for burning. And then the last one is passive too, every 4 turns. She retaliates and then bleed is applied. Now for Christopher, the first skill is active, but it's every 4 turns. The second is passive. Every 2 turns, control style hero squad allies defense is increased by 20% for 2 turns, and the last passive skill is every 8 turns too. So in round 1, Donald increases the damage taken by all enemies by 3.8% for 4 turns, stacking up to 4 times. And then Yamira reduces the damage dealt by bleeding and burning enemies. So Donald is increasing the damage to the enemy, and Yamira is reducing the damage dealt by the enemy. Now round 2 is more of an active round. Every 2 turns, Donald deals 57% damage to burning enemies, and the damage is increased by 50% if they're bleeding, and increases damage taken by enemy up to 4 turns, stacking up to 4 times. Yamira reduces damage dealt, just like in round 1, and then every 2 turns, Christopher, for every control hero, allies defense decreased by 20% for 2 rounds. Now round 3 is the same. It's a passive round just like round 1. It's increasing the damage dealt and reducing the damage received. Now round 4 is a much more active round. In addition to his other skills, Donald applies burn to the first 2 rows, dealing 28.5% damage each turn for 2 turns, and the damage is increased by 60% for disarmed enemies. And then for Yamira, she adds every 4 turns for every control style friendly squad present, 1 stack of bleed is applied to the first 2 enemy rows, dealing 7.6% damage per turn for 4 turns. And then Christopher, every 4 turns, deals 40% damage to all enemies and applies burn to last 2 enemy rows, dealing 40% damage per turn for 3 turns. And this is where they're all starting to come together, where the previous 3 rounds preparing for round 4 come into play, because now there's going to be excessive amount of damage for starting with round 5, because they're now bleeding and burning. And now round 5 is a more preparation type of round, just like rounds 1 and 3. Now for round 6, Donald increases the damage, and then every 2 turns he deals 57% damage to burning enemies, and damage increased by 50% for bleeding, which now takes advantage of Yamira's skill from the previous round 4. And with Yamira, she reduces the damage dealt by 15.2% for bleeding enemies and by 6% for burning, which also takes advantage of the skills used in round 4, because now all 3 rows of troops are burning and the front 2 rows are bleeding. And with Christopher, he's increasing the defense by 20% for 2 turns for every control hero. Round 7 is a repeat of rounds 1, 3, and 5. It's just increasing the damage and decreasing the damage received. Now round 8 is where the preparation starts adding with the active skills. So Donald applies burn to first 2 rows, dealing 28.5% damage for 2 turns, and then damage is increased by 60% for disarmed enemies, and then increases subsequent damage taken by enemies by 3.8% for 4 turns, stacking up to 4 times. Now Yamira, every 8 turns, deals 475% damage to the first 2 rows, applying silence to them for 2 turns. And then every 4 turns, for every control style friendly squad present, 1 stack of bleed is applied to the first 2 enemy rows, dealing 7.6% damage per turn for 4 turns. This comes in handy for rallies. That means her skills get progressively stronger depending on how many control hero squads you have in your rally. And now for Christopher, every 8 turns deals 280% damage to all enemies and applying disarm to all burning enemy squads for 1 turn, which they're all now burning because of Donald. Then every 4 turns deals 40% damage to all enemies and applies burn to the last 2 enemy rows, which means now all of the rows of troops are burning. And now for the next 2 rounds, the enemy damage is being reduced significantly because they're burning and bleeding, and then on top of it, Donald is decreasing the amount of damage received from the enemy. There's a few ways that I found to strengthen the controlled dream team. The burn Tempest Arms, bleed Tempest Arms, and then Tempest Arms with the skill for silence or disarm would work perfectly with these to kind of elevate them more to cause more damage, and then using Donatello resonated with Donald. Now with Donatello's skills, damage is further increased by 80% against burning enemies, which works perfectly. Damage is increased by 45% against disarmed or silenced enemies, which would work well for rounds 4 and 8. Then every 2 turns, Donatello deals 40% damage to the enemy front row. Damage increased by 60% against burning enemies, which obviously works very well. The Control Hero Squad differed quite a bit from Resilience in that there's many rounds of preparation for the active rounds of 4, 8, 12, 16, etc. And the amount of damage they cause is pretty significant in the active rounds. So that was interesting to see. And then obviously adding some Tempest Arms and then resonating Donald with Donatello, I think would make it even better. Well, from what I have seen. But I hope this video helps you, and definitely pay attention to the skills of these heroes. They work well together using different generations. I keep seeing players using all Gen 19 and they lose, and it's not even close. So please keep that in mind. If you have any questions, feel free to put them right down in the comments, and please like, share, and subscribe. Thank you for watching. Until next time, bye bye.